So we have the Nation of Islam, which is for the most part under the radar screen, because the society doesn't encourage Nation of Islam. The society does not encourage this spiritual side. Okay, so we have a situation where we leave school, we go to the building society. This is the pattern in the society. We leave school, we go to the building society, we take out a mortgage, which really means dead gauge, if you take it to its
dead weight,
etymological root, dead gauge. We take out a dead gauge in order to buy a house. And from that moment, we are saddled with 25 years paying huge amounts of interest. Yeah, remember that word, interest. The whole of society is programmed to do this, and when you turn on the TV, you see these home improvement shows. There's a whole heap of these buying homes and selling homes. There's a whole heap of shows about property development on the television. There's no shows that I know of that show you or empower you how to build a family, community, and nation. So the whole society is programmed to go through this like lemmings, through this sequence where you go to the building society, take out a mortgage, you get a house, and then you've made it, or you've not made it, but you're on the ladder, you're on the property ladder. And those who haven't made it onto the property ladder, who are living in council houses, end up feeling lost, somewhere down the line, because you're sitting on a house worth 150 grand or whatever, and I'm still on the first rung of the ladder in the council house with my family around me, but for some reason I'm seen as less than.
And that's really interesting, because that's what the television does. The television is a method that's used to program us into thinking, feeling, and being specific ways. And that's why I love YouTube and things, because what it does is it allows us to see things from an alternative perspective, or alternatives. And it allows us to see that there's more than one way for us to live our lives, and that we see that if I look at Christianity in its proper state, or Buddhism, or which other religion or ways of life, that they're still very much the same. Improve myself, improve my family, my community, my nation. So again, it's about moving away from what this society is saying, away from what you were calling the left brain way of life, and moving into a more balanced way, or incorporating the right brain in order to have a balance. Because it's got to be, there's got to be a balance of both in order for us to be able to function. And that's what really the male and the female do. You have the male who is more left brain in terms of being more functional and practical, and the female being spiritual in nature. Both the male and the female are spiritual. However, the female leans more on the spiritual and the emotional side. And when both of them work together, then we have a level of harmony. And that's really what family is.
When the male and the female and the balance is measured, and that fulcrum is found, then we start to get life.
Yeah.
And that is the opposite of the dead gauge. That's right. The life gauge.
That's right.
The life gauge is measured by how much balance there is.
Right. And then all other things spring from that, because that's the basic foundation. Because Jesus, even in the Bible, he said he didn't come to build buildings or anything. He came to build people. He came to build human potential. Because what comes from that human potential, what comes from those people who are obedient to the laws and the structures of God, is not only just buildings, but we're talking about dynasties, we're talking about nations.
Dynasties being families.
Right.
Long term.
That's right. It's so much more than just a little house. It becomes so much more. And if you look at even, Abraham, who's called the father of religion, when he was around, he travelled for years and years and years. He wasn't so involved in building a house, a physical house as itself. But what he did is he built human potential within people in order for those principles to live so much longer than any house could.
All praise is due to Allah. And we know Abraham did build a house, he raised the house, the spiritual house, but we'll get to that.
With his son, that's right.
We'll get to that. It's further down the line, inshallah. You cannot speak about building society without mentioning interest. We just talked about interest, and there's no interest in this society in focusing on right spiritual brain. There's a little interest, I should say. There is interest, but there seems to be very little. But you cannot speak of building society, building a society or a building society without talking about interest, In a worldly building society, as I'll call it, interest can be thought of as a rent on lending money. It is the price of credit that is interest. Yeah, you're looking at me with a blank expression. You...
How dare you? I'm with him.
You're with me,
Aren't you with him, brothers and sisters?
Okay.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Interest. It's a rent on lending money. You lend some money and you pay rent on lending that money, and they call it interest. Yeah.
Which is you're paying twice. That's
Which is
yes.
So,
sure. I got it.
In our definition of building society, interest is the state of wanting to know or learn about something or someone. That's our interest. Their interest is rent. Our interest is that yearning to know, that yearning to be informed. Yeah. Our interest is not the price of credit. It is the fuel that leads to credit. Yeah. When you're interested in family, community, and nation, that leads you towards credit. You get credit for that in the eyes of Allah.
In the hadith, the Prophet Muhammad said you're actually in the path of God while you're learning.
Yes.
And you come out of the path of God when you stop learning.
Yeah.
So learning is part of the desire, the drive that generates life within us, and it helps us to keep us alive, youthful, fruitful.
Yes.
It allows us to stay productive.
Yeah. And repetition is the mother of all learning. Yeah. So therefore, interest, looking at interest, the term high interest rate in the two opposite worlds refers to two completely different things. Two opposite things. A high interest rate in the building society, worldly building society, is a crippling factor. You got a high interest rate, you don't want no high interest rate, right? Because you're going to have to pay back more. In our building society, a high interest rate is a good thing because the people are really interested in doing and building and learning. Yeah. So the question I've got for you here now, what is the rate of interest in our building society? Who sets that rate of interest in our building society? And what determines the rate of interest that we have in buildings, family, community, and nation for self? Those are three deep questions.
Yeah, and he's flung them all on me at one time. let me just hold on, because I'm thinking about interest rate, and I'm thinking about how the two are the interest in each society is so different, because you want a low interest rate in the financial world, in the banking world, but you want a high interest rate
in our world.
In our world. So if you have a high interest rate, people are crying in the banking system because they're saying, "Oh my goodness, my bills are going right up and everything." But in the educational system, or even in our world, a low interest rate is a really bad thing. So they're quite opposite to one another, which is synonymous with the